Every morning, as the sun rose and the shutters of the bakery lifted with a creak, Faisal would find a little girl sitting quietly near the door. She couldn't have been more than 9 or 10 years old. Her clothes were torn and dusty, her small feet bare against the cold cement, and her tangled hair fell over her eyes. She never begged, never spoke. Just sat there with a quiet stillness, holding a small container in her lap, waiting silently as the world rushed past. What caught Faisal's attention most were her eyes, large, dark, and filled with a kind of pain that seemed too heavy for a child. They weren't the kind of eyes that asked for help, they were the kind that had already stopped expecting it. That unspoken sorrow stayed with Faisal, long after the customers came and went. At first, he didn't say much. He was a simple man, busy with kneading dough and serving people. But something about that girl made him pause. The next day, and every day after, he placed a warm piece of bread into her container. Not as charity, but as a quiet gesture, something between care and connection. She would look up at him with surprise, then nod gently, almost as if she wasn't used to being noticed. She still didn't speak, and neither did he. But there was something powerful in their silence. A kind of trust began to grow between them, unspoken but real. Other people passed her by without a second glance. But Faisal saw her. Every single morning. And somehow, that small exchange, a piece of bread and a shy nod, became a lifeline in her forgotten world. Days turned into weeks, and the little girl slowly became a part of the bakery's rhythm. Faisal didn't even have to look anymore, he knew she'd be there, curled up near the doorway before sunrise, waiting silently as the city stretched awake. Regular customers started noticing her too. Some would drop a few coins into her tin. A few offered snacks or leftovers. Most walked by without a word. But Faisal? He gave her something deeper. A warm breakfast, a smile, and, without ever saying it, a promise that she wasn't invisible. There was no name exchanged. No small talk. Just quiet understanding. Some mornings, she'd look up at him with tired eyes, and he'd give a slight nod, placing a fresh bun or cup of milk near her. Other times, she wouldn't even lift her gaze. Still, he left the food, always. Over time, the girl's shoulders began to relax. Her eyes, though still distant, held a flicker of trust. She no longer flinched when someone walked past. Faisal's presence gave her a strange kind of shelter. The silence between them wasn't empty, it was full of kindness, spoken in gestures rather than words. One chilly evening, as Faisal closed his shop, he noticed her sleeping on the bench outside. The wind was harsh, and she had nothing to protect herself. Without a second thought, he quietly walked over, covered her with an old blanket he kept for deliveries, and placed a bottle of water beside her. He stood there for a moment, watching her breathe. Still so young. Still so broken. She never woke. Never said thank you. But she didn't run either. And somehow, that meant everything. One cold morning, as the shutters rattled open and the smell of freshly baked bread filled the street, something felt wrong. The little girl wasn't there. Faisal paused. His eyes scanned the empty spot beside the doorway. Maybe she was running late. Maybe she'd be there in a few minutes. He went inside, set out her usual piece of bread, and waited. But the morning passed. Then noon. The bread remained untouched. The next day, still no sign of her. By the third day, the silence felt heavier than ever. The bench outside seemed emptier, the mornings colder. Customers came and went, but Faisal's eyes drifted constantly toward the door, hoping to see her face. He didn't even know her name, but her absence had left a space in his life he couldn't explain. Unable to sit still, he left the shop early and walked the streets. Alleyways, parks, markets, any place a child might wander. He asked strangers, vendors, shopkeepers, even street children. "Have you seen a little girl, small, thin, always barefoot, sits near my bakery? Most shook their heads. A few didn't even bother to respond. To them, she was just another face in the crowd, forgettable. But to him, she mattered. The nights became restless. Faisal barely touched his dinner. He found himself sitting outside his own shop long after closing, hoping she'd return. Hoping she was safe. It haunted him, how someone so small, so invisible to the world, could leave behind such a loud silence. People forget beggars. They forget the nameless. But he remembered her. And he waited, because sometimes, when your heart makes a quiet bond, it refuses to let go, even when the world does. It was a rainy afternoon, the kind that soaked the streets and chased away customers. Faisal stood behind the counter of his bakery, watching the water slide down the glass. Business was slow. His thoughts, as they often did, drifted to the little girl he hadn't seen in months. Then, the doorbell chimed softly. He looked up, expecting a regular. But standing there, drenched from the rain yet glowing with warmth, was a young girl. Her clothes were clean. Her hair was neatly combed. In her hand, she held a small notebook pressed against her chest. Faisal froze. His heart skipped. "It's you," he whispered. The girl nodded with a shy smile, the first real smile he had ever seen on her face. "I got admitted into a shelter home," she said, stepping closer. "They give us food, clothes, and I go to school now." Faisal blinked, unable to find the words. Relief, joy, and disbelief all swirled inside him. "I came back because..." She opened her notebook, her hands trembling slightly, and gently handed it to him. Inside was a drawing. Crude, yet full of emotion. A small bakery. A bench. A little girl sitting with a box. A man placing a piece of bread inside it. A single moment, captured forever. "You were the first person," she said, voice soft but steady, "who made me feel like I existed." Faisal's eyes welled with tears. He hadn't done much, just a piece of bread each day. A small gesture. But to her, it had meant the world. That rainy afternoon, in the quiet warmth of the bakery, something unspoken was finally said. Sometimes, it only takes one person to remind another that they are seen, and they matter. Sometimes. The kindness you show in silence echoes louder than any words ever could. A piece of bread. A warm glance. A simple gesture that asks for nothing in return. To you, it may seem small. But to someone forgotten, it can mean everything. Never ignore the quiet ones. The ones who don't speak. The ones who blend into the background. Because behind their silence, is a story waiting to be changed. One small act of compassion can rewrite an entire life. So be kind. Even when no one is watching. Because someone, somewhere, always feels it.